Hey, this is a presentation I presented at Dreamforce 2016 in the Lightning Theater. Unfortunately, those weren't recorded, so I wanted to put this up on the internet in case anyone wanted to take a look or interested in Community Builder and Lightning components. So this particular presentation, it's kind of the baseline on architecting Lightning components for a Community Builder. What you need to know just to kind of get started kind of assumes that you have some knowledge of the programmatic features of Lightning components, but you should be able to get by with some pretty basic knowledge. And then just real quick, I am a longtime Salesforce consultant, recently started working at Twitch. I have a bunch of certifications. The Community Cloud is the most recent one I have. But the past couple of years, I've been working out a lot in the Community Cloud space, pretty exclusively, and even won a 2015 Partner Innovation Award for Community Cloud. So I've done a lot of them. Did a lot of them on Visualforce and Apex. But in the last year here in 2016, there's been a lot of improvements to the platform for Community Cloud that's kind of enabling Lightning to be used much more prevalently. Um, and so there is kind of a lot of demand for this particular type of technology, so it's good to be familiar with it. All right, so just jumping in real quick, I kind of wanted to go over what Community Cloud is, what Community Builder is, just in case someone hasn't used them before. So Community Cloud, basically the way that I like to think about it is it's a way for you to interact with people that aren't part of your Salesforce instance. So whether they're customers, if you're a B2C company, partners, if you're doing some co-selling, or other employees, maybe you have some sort of internal employee collaboration that's happening for, HR questions or whatnot. And basically what happens with Community Cloud is you've got your internal Salesforce, and then you have kind of these sort of microsites, I suppose. They're kind of encapsulated within your Salesforce org, so they usually will have a different URL and whatnot. But you can expose your data, so your records, whether it's for partners, maybe you're doing co-selling. So you might expose leads and accounts and opportunities, selectively to them based on criteria. It's pretty similar to your internal sharing model, depending on what license you have for your Community Cloud members. But you're basically exposing segments of your data to those people in a different interface for their particular use case. And similarly, you could have something else for customer support if you want to have cases be exposed there, knowledge articles and stuff like that. So each Salesforce instance can have a large number of communities, so you can have all these different use cases. And then users can be a part of multiple communities, one community. Your internal users could have access to certain communities as well. So there's a lot of shared access and a lot of shared data depending on how you set it up. The one thing that is much more segmented is chatter. So between different instances, the chatter is kind of siloed to that instance. For internal Salesforce, obviously, there's a little bit more potential visibility. The groups are separate for all the instances, but you're able to see some of the chatter feeds on records inside Salesforce, the internal instance. So I guess one of the interesting things, as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of custom interfaces, I guess, for Community Cloud. So it's a little bit different from internal Salesforce in that you had Salesforce Classic, you have Lightning Experience, and that's kind of the de facto standard of it looks like that you're going to build whether it's Visualforce pages in the past with standard Visualforce components or Lightning components today with SLDS. Um, they kind of it's predefined what they need to look like to fit in with the ecosystem that you're building in. With Community Cloud, it's a little more interesting because a lot of these are public facing. So, a B2C customer community, a lot of companies will want branding for their community to look very similar to the rest of their ecosystem, their design standards, maybe their existing website. So as a developer, you have a lot of opportunity, if you find it interesting, a lot of front end opportunity to get a little bit fancier. Sometimes there's more unique ways of solving things that are more complex based on a particular need. Where it's not 100% about the business logic. There's the business logic and there's how it looks, how it feels. So the user experience is something that matters a little bit more in Community Cloud. So it's kind of a fun place to be within Salesforce. All right, so jumping into kind of the past. So I mentioned I did a lot of Visual Force communities in the past. So there used to be kind of three different ways to go about it. You'd use kind of the standard tabs. You'd either customize that and just put Visual Force on top of it, or they had site.com, which was kind of the precursor to Community Builder. It's kind of a WYSIWYG that was a little bit harder to use. And the main reason that I would suggest moving away from those, as long as Lightning is sufficient for your needs, is that with Visual Force, the mindset on how you develop in Visual Force versus Lightning components is different. With Visual Force, I think it was a lot more of a page-based development process. So, you get a website that you need to build that has 12 pages. You build 12 pages, but you're not thinking, each of those pages has X number of potential components that could be reused. It's not really the mindset because it's much more one-off. So that being the case, and because there's no WYSIWYG for Visual Force, it's very, very developer-centric if you want to make changes, unless your developers basically build administratable interfaces beyond, just custom labels and stuff like that. You're kind of stuck having to use developers to change anything. So if you want to change, the number of results that show up on something, right? You have to go in and modify the query. Whereas with Lightning components, you could find some of those things that might change, expose them as attributes on a component, and then an administrator can kind of tweak them as necessary. The other downside of Visual Force and the old Force.com sites is that there's a lot of standard Salesforce pages that you'd like to use from Classic, including a lot of them were chatter pages, right? So chatter files, chatter groups, groups lists, just chatter, the feed in general. None of those are responsive, so either you had to rewrite them from scratch and then lose out on all the features that get introduced every quarter, or you have to kind of hack the CSS of those pages, which is not supported and could break at any time. So it's kind of a lose-lose situation for using those functionalities of the platform. And then, the final reason you want to get off that, if possible, is that Salesforce is prioritizing Community Builder and Community Templates going forward. So there's already been functionality that is meant for Lightning. It's not put into Classic, and you don't want to invest in kind of not a dying technology, but a technology that is being put closer to maintenance mode rather than having time basically be put in it from Salesforce R&D. All right, so Builder is the new way to go about doing community building, and I'll get into a little demo of it right after this. But basically, what Builder is a WYSIWYG. So basically, you spin up a community through Salesforce. You pick kind of a baseline template. So right now, Napili is the one that you typically pick. It's the most extensible, but as part of Winter 17, Salesforce is coming out with a community templates program called Lightning Bolt. And so basically what that is partners can create templates that you can choose from, and it might fit your vertical a little bit better. But what's nice about this is that there are a bunch of configurations you can do so you can get something off the ground very quickly. So they have all sorts of branding things, like the ability to upload images for your logo, the background image of the header. You can change fonts across the site. You can change kind of the branding color scheme. It has list views, edit views, record views. So those are all kind of out of the box. You can create custom pages and drop little widgets on them. So Salesforce has a large number of standard components. So like if you wanted to throw some static text on there with a picture, they have a rich text component you could drop on the page and just kind of edit in a WYSIWYG kind of environment. So there's a lot you could do without writing any code that looks pretty good, kind of Web 2.0-y. So one of the other nice things is once you start getting into the actual development, they do support custom Lightning components, and I think that was new earlier this year, maybe Winter 16. And basically what that allows you to do is you can create your own little widgets and components and drop them onto Builder to be used by administrators. So it kind of, between Lightning components and Lightning templates, we're kind of getting to the point where they're hitting parity with what you could do with Visualforce. So you could do pretty much complete branding um, of, within Community Builder, whereas before you're kind of stuck with the sort of look and feel that Salesforce had built within the PLE. So big changes that are happening in Winter 17. Design tokens are another nice thing that you should be aware of if you're doing development. It's a little bit outside of the scope of this particular presentation, but essentially what they are is a way for you to define, similar if you've worked on other web applications, you can define CSS that is used throughout your whole site. Design tokens, they're essentially creating those variables in a single place and then being able to reference them throughout all of your components. So if you create, everyone on your team's working on different components, you could say, hey, the design token for X is going to be this value. Everyone reference the token, don't hard code it in, and then when everyone goes to production, the administrator changes that value and everyone's component changes the font or changes the background color or whatever. So that's pretty cool. The biggest thing I think is that by default, Community Builder is mobile responsive. So as long as you're not doing anything that messes with that, you get that kind of out of the box. So you get all the chatter and all that stuff that's responsive. So that's a big win. All right, so just a quick demo of Community Builder, just so you can see what it looks like. For me, I go in here. I've already created the community, and this is kind of what a community looks like pretty much straight out of the box. So if I pop in here to Builder, we can see what it looks like here. So it's an editor here for the colors. So these are pretty cool. If you change these, it'll change kind of the color scheme of the site. One nice thing is you can actually upload your logo here and it will generate a palette for you. There are a couple items here for additional colors. These are all going to be tokens that I mentioned before. So you can come in here, change the link color to something else, and your links will change. Company logo, header logo for up here, and then fonts. So if you want to come in here and change the font, you'll see that it's kind of changing all over the place. And then pop over to the page editor. So here's where I can go through. There's all of these standard components and then a couple that I created. So in this case, let's say I wanted to come in here and add, I don't know, featured topics. They might already be on here actually. So they just pop in here. I can click show title, not show title. I can change the header. This one's not showing up because I don't think I have any featured topics, but yeah, it's a pretty cool little piece of functionality. You can drag and drop things all over the place if you wanted. And this is actually the Winter 17, so I think my org just got updated recently, so it's a little bit different than what it used to be. So that's pretty cool. It's essentially responsive right away, and then whenever you're ready, you can publish them. All right, let's hop back. So the basic requirements to create a Lightning component are very simple to get it to work in Builder. So if you have an existing component or you're making a brand new one, all you need to do is add the Force Community Available for All Page Types interface to your Lightning component, and then it will show up in Builder. If you don't have it in there, it just won't show up. You'll have it in your development library, but it's not going to show up for anyone to choose from. One thing to note, if you're building a component that has child components in it, so you're maybe iterating over a list and you wanted to create a component for that particular line item, you don't have to put the interface Force Community Available for All Page Types for all of the child components. You just have to think about, do I want this particular component to show up in Builder? If so, add the interface. And that's true of the interfaces for Lightning Experience as well. Just the top level one is the one that you need to have the interface for. And then design tokens, just kind of wanted to explain how you use those. So basically you need to create a default tokens .token bundle that extends Force base which I've got here. It doesn't have to have anything in it, it just needs to exist. And then once you've got that, there are a number of standard Salesforce design tokens that you can create or you can leverage. And that's kind of what's over here in this branding editor, the ones that I showed. You can also create your own custom um, token values, and that's what you'd put within this default tokens. But for this particular instance, I just wanted to show how to use the font family, and that's how you do it here. So I've got links at the very end in terms of how to find all these standard component design tokens and things like that. So just reference that to find those. So quick demo of those two. So if I come over here, so I've got this featured users component that I wrote, and you can see here I've commented out the first line, but I don't have available for all page types in there. So when we're over here in the page editor, you can see I've only got the custom groups component that I created. But if I come in here, swap this out, and save that new header, now when I come back in here, we should be able to see the featured users show up. There it is, the newest community users. So drop that over here. We've got the title. We've got some people that are new users for this particular community. So it's pretty simple there. The other thing I wanted to show was the design token. So you remember when I flipped the different fonts, so I switched to Gravitas 1 here. So I've got both the header and the primary font. Everything's changing except for my component here. And if we come take a look at the component, we've got the design tab here. Oops, the style. So we're actually defining the font family here. So we don't want to do that. We want to do what we've got commented out below, which is reference the token, and that will make sure that our component is leveraging what needs to be leveraged in terms of the administrative console part of Community Builder. So we've saved that. We'll do a refresh, and now our component should reference that. Perfect. So we go in here, change it back to Helvetica, and you can see that now this is kind of fitting in with everything else. So that's pretty cool. All right, so the next thing, it's less about components and more about knowing how Community Cloud works. So there is a little bit of a difference with Community Cloud from internal Salesforce because these are external users. They aren't necessarily as privy to what you're doing on internal Salesforce. And so there are some additional features and functionality that you just need to be aware of. One of them is community preferences. So if we come into the community setup menu, there are a handful of preferences you could set for the community. I think the biggest one to be aware of here is that you can choose whether people see real names or nicknames within the community. So use case for this is you have a customer support community, people are interacting with each other, and you want it to be anonymous. You don't want people to see real names all over the place. Versus, maybe a partner community where people in a professional setting are looking at each other's names. One use case we had for this is there was a customer community and there were some VIPs in it, and the company didn't want the VIPs to be kind of harassed by people who see their names and then want to see, they want to start trying to talk to them and stuff like that. So there's times when you want your user base to be anonymous in the community, and so when you're creating your components, you want to make sure that you're checking that setting to see if nickname has been selected, because you don't want to expose information that your administrators are trying not to expose if you just kind of dump full name onto the page. The other thing is making sure your data is kind of scoped correctly. So as I mentioned, you could be a part of multiple communities. You can be an internal Salesforce, external community, kind of all over the place. Your user still has access to data regardless of where you are, right? So when you're building a component, there's on a lot of the standard Salesforce objects, there's this network ID field. If you've only worked on internal Salesforce, you just ignore it because it's always null. But in communities, you have to be aware that you're inside a community and you need your queries to be scoped by the network ID. Otherwise, you're going to return data they can see, but it's going to be out of context. If you're in both a partner community and a customer community, you don't want to see sales chatter within your customer support site. It's just creating a good user experience. So it's just something to be aware of. It's pretty simple to implement. And I'll just show some quick demos of those two as well. So what we got here in this newest members component, we got some full names. So we've got Bert Macklin and Leslie Nope. If I switch into the community management section here, and go to preferences, you'll see show nicknames is one of the options. So I'll click that to show nicknames. I'll save it, and I will open Builder back up. And now you'll see that I've got here, it's not my name anymore, it's M. Welbu, I think is what my nickname is set up as. But our newest members here are still full names. So if we come into our developer console, kind of walk through here, so we're running a query, grabbing the information, that's all fine, and we're throwing the results into this wrapper class to kind of abstract away the S object. And so as you go through here, you can see I've got the photo URL, and then I've got this string I'm constructing with last name, comma, first name. And so, at this point, we're not looking at that preference at all. We're just dumping data to the page, and in internal Salesforce, that's probably fine. In here, for a community, what we need to do is we need to check to see if that option's set to true for this particular community, and then act accordingly. So that's what I've got here below. Just running a query, checking to see for this particular network, which is a community. For our current one, is this particular display enabled. What's interesting for communities, for this particular setting, if you were to just query the name field, it actually is smart enough to know which one to display. But in this case, you can see that I'm kind of constructing a string with last name, first name, and it's not smart enough to kind of jump through that hoop. So I'm going to comment that out, and then we're going to go back to Builder and just kind of see how that works. So remember, we're still on nickname setting. So now you see Andy and POTUS are the names that are shown there. We'll uncheck that, and we should get real names again. Awesome. So it's a pretty easy thing to implement. It's just with Community Cloud, it's kind of you don't know what you don't know until you've built a community and you see all these random settings that you never had to know about before. The other thing I wanted to show, so featured groups here is a component. I tried to make it easy. There's private company announcements and HR questions internal. Those are internal Salesforce groups. I am an administrator who has access to both this particular community and internal Salesforce, and this component wasn't scoped to this community. It's just every group that I have access to. So if I come into the community here, or the dev console, just kind of walk through, you could see the featured groups. It's running this query, and it's just get me all the groups. So I have access to groups in multiple environments, so it's just going to give me all of them. What I need to do, again, is come through here, check the network ID fields for this collaboration group against the current network, and that will actually do the scoping for me. So if I pop back into Builder, now I should only see community tips. Perfect, so that's all that shows up here. And you can kind of verify that over here in the groups tab. So this is the out-of-the-box list view. And so you can see community tips is the only active group. So pretty straightforward, but just, keep security in mind when you're building these. So that's really all I had. I kind of wanted to give you a taste for just kind of the basic Community Cloud, Community Builder, just building components, just what you need to know. I've got a whole lot of links on this page to kind of help you go through what you are doing throughout this entire presentation. They're all also listed at this link at the top, bit.ly/mw-df16. So I've got the presentation up there, the slides, I've got the source code there and everything. So you should be able to grab everything you need. Perfect. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. My information should be in the details below. Otherwise, hopefully this helped you out. Thank you.